Rain had a strange habit of arriving exactly when Isla Rafik needed it the least. Today, of all days, it came down in sheets, the kind of rain that turned the narrow street outside her rented apartment into a river of brown water. The kind that made her mutter 100 prayers under her breath as she struggled to lock the door while balancing her small son on one hip. "Hassan, sweetheart, hold Mama's scarf. Not my hair." "Ouch, yes, thank you," she whispered, trying to sound patient. The blind date had already been a bad idea. Farah, her elderly neighbor, had insisted for weeks. "Beta, you are young. You should meet someone respectable. Not all men are like your ex. Just try." Isla didn't have room in her life for dating. Not mentally, not emotionally, and certainly not financially. But Farah had that tone, the tone of a mother who refused to let her stay lonely forever. And the man Farah proposed was polite, well-mannered, a little strict maybe, but good-hearted. "His name is Zane," Farah had said, "and he agreed to meet you at 7. Isla had checked the time then. Now she checked it again. 7:14 p.m. Wonderful. Late, soaked, and carrying a sleeping child to a blind date. Nothing could go wrong. Her motorbike, which she had prayed would work at least a day, refused to start the moment she touched it. The rainstorm had drenched the wires. She tried again and again, her hands trembling, her heart sinking. Finally, with a choking cough, the bike came alive. She exhaled shakily, placed Hassan carefully in front of her, covered him as best as she could, and started down the narrow, muddy lane. She should have known better. Halfway through the lane, the wheels skidded. She tried to balance, but the mud pulled her down with the cruel confidence of something that had done this 1,000 times. Her knees slammed into the ground. Mud splashed across her shower camise, streaks of brown climbing up her sleeves and staining her scarf. She gasped, checking Hassan first. He was startled but unharmed. Okay, we're fine," she whispered, even though nothing felt fine. She pushed the bike upright, her muddy hands slipping. Rainwater dripped from her eyelashes. Every passing second felt like a whisper of humiliation. Still, she kept going, because mothers don't get to cancel things just because they're tired or embarrassed. Mothers just continue, asterisk asterisk. By the time Isla reached the restaurant, her clothing had dried in patches, forming strange patterns of mud across the fabric. Her scarf looked like it had been dipped in chocolate and then wrung out. Hassan had fallen asleep again, his small body warm against her chest. The restaurant, Crescendo, was one of the richest in the city. She felt small just standing outside it. The windows glowed with warm lights, and through the glass she could see people in polished clothes, laughing over delicate dishes she couldn't pronounce. Isla took a deep breath and stepped inside. Heads turned immediately. She wasn't loud. She wasn't dramatic. She simply existed, in a place where someone dressed like her did not. The hostess froze, plastering on a polite smile a second too late. A couple at the front table whispered something, a snort escaping the man. Isla kept her eyes down and approached the hostess. I'm here for a reservation. Under the name Zain Mirza." The hostess blinked. "Yes, ma'am. He's waiting." Her tone softened a little, out of pity or politeness. Isla couldn't tell. She followed the hostess through the restaurant, every step heavy with embarrassment. All she wanted was a hole in the floor, or maybe to evaporate. Yes, evaporating would be best. At the far corner table, a sharply dressed man in a dark suit sat examining his watch. He looked like someone carved from marble, straight posture, crisp jawline, eyes focused. A man who belonged in this world completely. Zain Mirza. Isla opened her mouth, but he saw her before she could speak. His expression dropped, not in confusion, not in curiosity, but in something painfully familiar, disappointment. His eyes moved over her muddy scarf, the stains on her clothes, the wet tendrils of hair escaping her bun, then to the child sleeping against her shoulder. He stood up slowly. "You're Isla?" His voice was calm, but clipped, as though he were bracing for something. "Yes," she whispered. "And this is—" He nodded toward Hassan. "My son. I'm so sorry." Farah thought. "I didn't mean to. I tried to get here earlier, but—" Her throat tightened. Zain held up a hand. "Sit, Please. She sat, though every cell in her body begged her to run. The table felt colder than the rain outside. She adjusted Hassan on her lap carefully, smoothing his damp hair. Zayn sat across from her, his eyes steady but unreadable. I wasn't told you were bringing a child, he said after a moment. I wasn't planning to, Isla replied quietly. My neighbor fell sick last minute. There was no one else to watch him. He nodded, slowly, as if absorbing the information but not knowing what to do with it. Silence stretched between them. I apologize for my appearance, she murmured, clutching the edges of her scarf. There was an accident on the way. The road was flooded. I fell. Zayn's eyes flicked to the dried mud on her sleeves. Something in his expression shifted, only slightly, but he didn't respond. A waitress approached, and for a moment Isla prayed she would disappear. Instead, the waitress gave Zayn a respectful smile, then glanced at Isla with a flicker of confusion she tried and failed to hide. Isla's cheeks burned. Zayn ordered something simple, then gestured at the menu. You can choose anything. She shook her head. Just water, please. You haven't eaten dinner? I'll eat later, she said softly. Hassan doesn't like waiting if he wakes up. Zayn looked at the sleeping child. You carry him everywhere. She nodded once. He's all I have. I can't leave him. Zayn leaned back, his expression unreadable, but his gaze lingered a little too long on the fatigue in her eyes, the damp strands clinging to her forehead. He seemed to hesitate, as if trying to decide whether to speak or end the date immediately. The food arrived. Isla barely touched her glass of water. Every minute felt like an apology, for her clothes, for her life, for daring to step into a world where she didn't belong. When Zayn finally spoke, his voice was lower. I'm not good at these meetings, he said. I prefer clarity, truth, and honestly, I didn't expect this. She swallowed. I know. You seem overwhelmed. You could say that, she whispered. Something softened in his eyes then, the faintest crack in his cold exterior. It appeared only for a second, then disappeared as quickly as it came. When the date ended, he stood and helped her pull out her chair, a gesture that surprised her. He didn't offer to walk her out. He didn't ask for another meeting. He simply said, get home safely. Isla nodded, adjusting Hassan on her shoulder, holding her wet scarf tightly. As she walked out, she didn't see Zayn watching her leave, his jaw tense, as though something about her had unsettled him in a way he didn't yet understand. He had almost walked away the moment he saw her. But the exhaustion in her eyes, and the child she held with such fierce gentleness. Something about her refused to let him. Asterisk, asterisk. The rain had stopped by the time Isla reached home, but the humiliation of the evening stayed with her like a second skin. She carried Hassan inside, laid him gently on their thin mattress, and removed his damp shoes. He curled into the blanket immediately, unaware of the storm his mother had survived. Isla sat at the edge of the bed, staring at her mud-stained clothes, her breath trembling. What was I thinking? She whispered to herself. A blind date. At a place like that. She should have known she didn't belong there. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the looks, the whispers, the disappointment on Zayn's face. Zayn Mirza didn't sleep either. He sat alone in his immaculate penthouse, the city lights glowing beneath him like a sea of stars. His jacket hung neatly over the couch. His dinner sat untouched on the table. He should have forgotten her already. She wasn't his type. She wasn't from his world. The blind date was a failure. He should have moved on. But the image kept returning. A woman entering a luxury restaurant covered in mud, head bowed, a sleeping child in her arms, and yet walking with quiet dignity. He rubbed his forehead and muttered under his breath, "Why are you still thinking about this?" Zayn disliked unpredictability. He disliked chaos. And Isla Rafiq was chaos wrapped in humility. But something about her had unsettled him, stirred something he didn't want to admit. He had judged her the second he saw her. He knew it, and it bothered him more than it should. The next morning, Isla dressed Hassan for school and walked him to the gate, promising to pick him up early if the clouds returned. She left quickly, not wanting other parents to see the dried mud stains that refused to wash out completely. She arrived at the clothing stall where she worked part-time. Her boss, Shazia, stared at her the moment she walked in. "What happened to you?" Isla forced a smile. "Long story. It looks like the ground fought you and won." "Something like that," she said, trying to laugh it off. Shazia narrowed her eyes. "Are you okay?" "Yes. Just tired." Shazia didn't believe her, but she didn't press. The store got busy, and Isla threw herself into work, grateful for the distraction. Folding clothes, helping customers, organizing stock. Each task kept her from thinking about the date. But around noon, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I hope you got home safely." ZM. Isla froze. Zane. Why would he text? The date had been a disaster. He hadn't shown any interest in seeing her again. Her heart beat faster, but she forced herself to lock the phone and stuff it in her bag. She didn't need confusion. She didn't need hope. Not from a man like him. Zane stared at his phone longer than he should have. He typed that message twice, deleted it once, and then finally sent it before he could overthink. He didn't know what response to expect, or if she would respond at all. Most people he met were eager to impress him, eager to talk, eager to gain something. But Isla, she felt like the kind of woman who apologized for taking up space. He leaned back in his office chair, tapping his pen against the desk. Nazhit, his longtime friend and COO, walked in with a folder. "You look like you argued with your reflection," Nazhit said. Zane gave him a look. "Do you need something?" "Just the quarterly reports. But also, yes, I need to know why Mr. Always in Control looks like he hasn't slept." Zane exhaled slowly. "The date. With the woman Farah Kala. Recommended?" Zane nodded. "So, how did it go?" Zane hesitated. "She was unexpected." Nazhit raised a brow. "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" "Both," Zane admitted. Nazhit grinned. "That sounds promising." "It isn't," Zane said quickly. "We're not compatible." "What?" Zane paused, searching for the right answer. He didn't want to say the truth. "Because I judged her. Because I don't understand her world. Because she looked at me like my words mattered when I wasn't even sure what I meant." Instead, he said, "It just wouldn't work." Nazhit shrugged. "If you say so." That evening, Ala walked to school to pick Hassan up. The sky had darkened again, clouds piling like heavy shadows. She hurried, adjusting her scarf. Hassan ran into her arms the moment he saw her. "Mama, Mama, look, I drew a house." She kissed his forehead. "It's beautiful. And there's you, and me, and the sun." She smiled softly. "I love it." As she held his hand, walking him home, her mind kept returning to the message from Zane. He didn't owe her anything. He didn't need to check on her. And yet, he had. That small courtesy warmed her in a way she didn't want to acknowledge. But then reality whispered. Men like him didn't stay. People like her weren't chosen. She was a single mother with 2 jobs, a messy life, and no space for heartbreak. By the time she reached home, she had convinced herself to forget about the message, until her phone buzzed again. Another number, this time Ferris. "Beta, how was the meeting yesterday? Did he behave well?" Isla hesitated. She didn't want Farah to worry. She didn't want to admit she'd arrived looking like a walking disaster. So she typed back, "It was fine. We talked for a bit. Thank you for arranging it." She put the phone down and exhaled deeply. "Fine. Yes." A word that covered everything and explained nothing. Zane stood by his living room window again, the city lights flickering below. He checked his phone a final time, still no reply. He wasn't sure if he felt disappointed or relieved. Maybe it was for the best. Their worlds were too different. He wouldn't know how to be gentle with someone like her. Yet, even as he told himself this, the image of her sitting across from him, tired, embarrassed, holding her son close, returned again and again. She had looked like someone carrying the weight of 100 unspoken battles. And Zane, for the first time in years, felt something tug at the cold, quiet corners of his heart. Curiosity, concern, something dangerously close to guilt. He hadn't asked her a single real question. Not about her life. Not about her struggles. Not about the child she protected with such fierce tenderness. He had let appearances speak for her, and he hated that about himself. Zane closed his eyes and whispered, almost unwillingly, "Why can't I forget you?" Isla lay beside her sleeping son, listening to the distant thunder rolling across the sky. The room was dim, the walls thin, the night heavy. She didn't want to think of Zane. Didn't want to wonder if he was thinking of her. Didn't want to hope for what wasn't meant for someone like her. But somewhere between exhaustion and sleep, one quiet thought settled in her chest. Maybe he hadn't judged her as harshly as she feared. Maybe he had seen something she didn't realize he noticed. She didn't know it yet, but Zayn Mirza would cross her path again, very soon, and in a way neither of them expected. Because fate had a strange habit of showing up exactly when life felt most impossible. The city woke to a restless morning, air heavy with humidity, clouds bruised with the promise of more rain. Isla hurried through her chores, preparing Hassan for school, preparing herself for another day of racing between work and responsibilities. She didn't know her life was about to collide with Zayn Mirza's again, in the most unexpected way. The clothing stall where she worked part-time was more crowded than usual. A sale announcement had pulled customers like bees to honey, and Isla found herself running from one side of the shop to the other, helping women choose outfits and answering endless questions. By noon, her feet ached, her throat felt dry, and her stomach hadn't seen food since morning. Shazia finally waved her toward the door. "Lunch break. Go before I faint watching you run around." Isla smiled gratefully. "Thank you." She stepped outside, searching for a quiet spot to sit, but the street was bustling. People moved like waves, umbrellas knocking into each other, vendors shouting, motorbikes weaving through narrow gaps. She spotted a small bench beside a closed electronics shop and sat down, unwrapping the sandwich she'd packed at dawn. But she had barely taken 2 bites when her phone rang. Farah's number. She answered immediately. "Auntie, is everything okay? Alabeda, the school called me. They said Hassan isn't feeling well. I tried to call you earlier." A sharp panic shot through Isla's chest. "What do you mean? What happened?" "They said he looked pale and dizzy. They need you to pick him up." Isla stood so quickly she dropped her sandwich to the ground. She didn't say goodbye. She just started running. Her heart hammered with every step as she pushed through crowds, dodging umbrellas and carts, praying under her breath. She reached the school within minutes, breathless and shaking. A teacher met her at the gate. "Allah," he complained of stomach pain, and he felt lightheaded. "We gave him water, but thought it best to call you." Isla rushed inside and saw Hassan lying on a small bed in the infirmary, his face pale, his eyes half open. "Mama," he whispered. Her heart broke. She gathered him gently into her arms. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now." He rested his head on her shoulder, too tired to speak. Isla thanked the teacher, signed the early dismissal form, and hurried outside. The sky, once threatening rain, finally opened again. Thunder cracked above. A cold wind swept through the street. Isla tightened her grip on Hassan and tried to shield him from the rain with her scarf. Her bike was parked across the street, but the road was already slick with water. A car sped past them without slowing. A splash of filthy water drenched Isla from head to toe. She gasped, not from the cold, but from the shock. Hassan whimpered weakly. "Mama, it's cold." "I know, love. I know," she whispered, teeth clenching. People turned to stare again. Some with pity, some with annoyance, some with the same quietly judging expression she'd seen at the restaurant. Isla blinked away tears. She just needed to get home, dry him, feed him, make him comfortable. She approached her bike, but as she reached for the handle, her wet hand slipped. The bike tilted, heavy under the weight of the soaked seat and muddy tires. Her strength was fading. "Come on," she whispered through chattering teeth, trying again. "Please just once work with me." But the bike refused to lift. And that's when a long shadow fell across her. A familiar voice spoke from behind her. "Allah." She froze. She knew that voice. Slowly, she turned. Zayn Mirza stood there, tall, composed, umbrella in hand, rain droplets speckling the shoulders of his tailored coat. His expression, which usually hovered between calm and cold, shifted sharply the moment he took in the scene. Isla soaked, her clothes muddy, her scarf slipping, and her son trembling in her arms. Concern flickered across his face, real, raw, unfiltered. "What happened?" he asked, stepping closer. Isla swallowed hard. "He's sick. I need to get him home." Zayn's eyes moved from her shivering hands to the trembling child. Without a single hesitation, He closed the distance between them. Give him to me. Isla blinked. What? Let me help. No, it's fine. I can manage. The words slipped out automatically, a habit born from years of doing everything alone. But her arms trembled. Her balance wavered. Her dignity cracked. Zane reached out gently, his voice softer this time. Isla, he needs warmth. And you need help. Her eyes stung, not from rain but from the sudden flood of emotions. She nodded silently and allowed him to take Hassan into his arms. Zane held the little boy carefully, adjusting the umbrella so rain wouldn't touch him. Hassan curled instinctively against his chest. Zane turned to her. Follow me. Where? My home is. I'm not taking you far, he said firmly. My car is just around the corner. Isla hesitated. Zane's voice softened. You're shaking. You can barely stand. Let me do this. For the first time in a long while, Isla allowed herself to accept help. Zane's car stood under a covered area near a high-end coffee shop. He opened the back door, placed Hassan gently inside, and switched on the heater. Isla stood awkwardly, water dripping from her scarf, unsure how to exist in such a clean, expensive space while looking like a drenched rag. Zane stepped back and scanned her from head to toe. You're freezing. I'm fine, she lied. You're really bad at lying, he replied quietly. Her lips parted, surprised at the unexpected softness in his tone. He removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders before she could protest. It's warm, he said. Don't argue. She didn't. She couldn't. The warmth seeped into her bones instantly, replacing the cold with something dangerously close to comfort. Zane closed the passenger door and turned to her. Is there a hospital nearby? Her breath hitched. No, he just needs rest. It's probably something he ate, or maybe he got cold. I could take him home. Zane studied her face, her exhaustion, her trembling hands, her worry. He nodded slowly. Fine, I'll drive you. Isla blinked. You don't have to. I know, he said, but I want to. He opened the front door for her. As Isla stepped in, she caught a glimpse of his expression, deep in thought, something unreadable swirling behind his eyes. Something troubled, something guilty, something gentle. The drive to her home was silent except for the rain drumming against the windows. Zane kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching Hassan breathe, watching Isla clutch the coat he'd placed around her, watching the worry etched into every part of her. He murmured quietly, You should have called someone. She gave a humorless laugh. There's no one to call. Zane's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He didn't know why it bothered him so much. The thought of her facing everything alone. The thought of her carrying burdens she never complained about. The thought of himself judging her so harshly the first night they met. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this small, messy, rain-soaked moment, would mark the beginning of a shift inside him. A shift he wasn't ready for. A shift he wouldn't understand for a long time. But it had already begun. Zane had never driven through this part of the city before. The narrow streets, cracked pavements, and crooked signboards felt foreign to him, a world far removed from the polished glass towers he lived and worked in. Yet here he was, hands tight on the steering wheel, following Isla's directions through twisting lanes and dimly lit corners. Just stop here, Isla said softly. He parked the car beside a small, aging building. The walls were chipped, the staircase narrow, the exterior dark except for a flickering bulb. Isla didn't look embarrassed, only tired. Let me carry him, Zane said, already stepping out. Isla hurried around the car. No, I can. He gave her a look, gentle but immovable. Isla, please. She paused, then nodded. Zane lifted Hassan carefully, his small head resting against Zane's shoulder. The little boy was warm with fever, breathing softly. Something twisted in Zane's chest, an unfamiliar ache. He wasn't used to holding children. He wasn't used to caring for anyone outside his close circle. But somehow, holding Hassan felt natural. Wrongly natural. Isla unlocked the door to her apartment. I'm sorry it's so small, she murmured. Zane didn't respond. Not because the apartment was small, but because he was busy absorbing the details. A single room divided by thin curtains. A small mattress pushed against the wall. A stack of children's books near the pillow. 2 cups drying on the counter. A sewing machine tucked in the corner, surrounded by folded fabric. Nothing luxurious, nothing extravagant, but everything clean, ordered, and cared for. A home built on love, not money. He laid Hassan gently on the bed. The boy stirred, his small fingers reaching for Isla. "I'm here," she whispered, brushing his hair. Zayn stepped back, watching her. No woman had ever looked more exhausted. No woman had ever looked more strong. Isla tucked Hassan in, then turned to Zayn. "Thank you for helping us." "It's nothing," he said. She shook her head. "It isn't nothing. You didn't have to stop. You didn't have to carry him. You didn't have to." "Isla." His voice was quiet, steady. "I wanted to." Her breath faltered for a second. She didn't know how to respond. Silence stretched between them. Not heavy, but soft. Gentle, like the quiet between two people who were beginning to see each other clearly for the first time. Then Isla forced a smile. "I'm sorry about that night. The mud, the mess, everything. You must have thought. I thought you'd had a difficult day," Zayn interrupted. Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected that. He looked away, uncomfortable. "I judged too quickly. I shouldn't have." Isla didn't know what surprised her more, the apology or the sincerity behind it. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, then cleared his throat. "Well, if you ever need anything." "I'll manage," she said quickly. Too quickly. Zayn noticed. "You don't have to manage everything alone." "That's what mothers do," she replied quietly. He didn't argue. Not because he agreed, but because he didn't know how to fight a truth shaped by years of loneliness. Zayn left after making sure Hassan's fever had lowered a bit. He handed Isla his coat. She tried to refuse it, but he insisted. "Keep it. It's raining. You need it more than I do." She didn't argue. When he reached his car, he paused for a long moment, staring at the building. The date had been a disaster. The second meeting had been accidental. But something had changed now. He felt it. He just didn't understand it. He didn't know why he cared, why her quiet strength clung to him, why he felt guilty for the judgment he'd carried in his eyes the night they met. He tried to shake it off as he drove away, tried to shift his mind back to work, to deadlines, to meetings. But Isla's soft voice followed him all night. That's what mothers do. 2 days later, Isla returned to work, exhausted but relieved that Hassan was feeling better. She couldn't afford to miss more shifts. Rent didn't wait. Bills didn't wait. Life didn't wait. During her lunch break, she sat behind the shop, mending a tear in a customer's clothing. Her fingers moved quickly, skillfully. Sewing was one of the few things she excelled at. A soft voice interrupted. "I didn't know you sewed." Isla looked up, startled. Zayn stood there, at her workplace, in a crowded bazaar, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She immediately stood. What are you doing here?" "I came to check on you." "And Hassan," he said simply. Her heart skipped a beat. "He's better." "Thank you," she murmured. Zayn glanced at the dress she was stitching. "How much do you earn for that?" Isla hesitated. 50 rupees. Zayn blinked. "For an hour of work? Nobody pays more." Zayn's jaw tightened. She could see anger flicker in his eyes. Not at her, but the reality she lived in. He motioned to the sewing machine. "Do you do design work too?" "Sometimes," she said cautiously. Zayn thought for a moment. "My company is looking for someone to assist with fabric prototypes for a new product line. Temporary job. Flexible hours. You be fairly paid." Isla stared at him. She couldn't process it. Was he serious? Why would someone like him offer work to someone like her? "Zayn, I don't think." "Don't say no without thinking," he said softly. "You deserve better than this." She looked around at the cramped stall, at the piles of discounted clothes, at the customers arguing loudly in the background. The gap between their worlds echoed louder than ever. "I don't want anyone to think you're giving me charity," she whispered. His voice was steady. "It's not charity. It's an opportunity. You're talented. Let me open a door. Whether you walk through it is up to you." Isla's chest tightened. She wasn't used to kindness from strangers. She wasn't used to opportunities that didn't demand something impossible in return. She looked down at her hands, rough from work, fingers marked by tiny needle pricks. "What would I have to do?" she finally asked. Zayn didn't smile, but something warm flickered in his eyes. "Just show up." He handed her a simple card with an address and time. "I'll be there," she whispered. Saying it felt like stepping into a new world. A world she didn't belong to. A world she wasn't sure she deserved. But maybe this was her chance. Zane stood up straight, nodded once, and left. Isla watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. She didn't know that this small job, this temporary position, would change everything. Because worlds didn't collide quietly. Sometimes they collided with a force that altered destinies. And hers had just begun to shift. The next morning, Isla Rafik woke to the sound of Hassan giggling. His small hands pulled at her scarf, tugging her into the living room with an energy that made her ache and smile at the same time. "Mama, look," he said, holding a drawing he'd made. Bright crayons scribbled across the page, forming a crooked little house, the sun above, and two tiny stick figures, one bigger, one smaller. Isla smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "You drew this all by yourself?" "Yes. And this," he added proudly, pointing to a figure beside the house, "is you. And this," he said, pointing to the smaller figure, "is me." Her heart ached with love, but also with exhaustion. She had promised herself that life would not overwhelm her. And yet, here she was, 2 jobs, a sick child, and the persistent memory of a man who had appeared suddenly, like a storm of possibility in her otherwise ordered chaos. By noon, Isla had reached Zane's office. The address he'd given her was a sleek building that gleamed under the sun. She hesitated at the entrance, smoothing her clothes, adjusting her scarf, and reminding herself to be professional. Her life had been full of compromises, but she wasn't about to compromise her dignity. Inside, the lobby was immaculate. The receptionist greeted her politely, showing her to a small office where Zane sat, reviewing some documents. He looked up, expression neutral but attentive, as if he had been expecting her. "Good morning, Isla," he said, voice calm. "Thank you for coming," she replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. He motioned to the chair across from him. "Sit. Let me explain." Isla listened carefully as he outlined the temporary position, assisting in designing fabric patterns, organizing samples, and occasionally attending meetings where her input might be required. Nothing extravagant, nothing overbearing, just work. Respectable work. Paid fairly. "I understand if you don't want this," Zane said, studying her face. "It's a professional environment, and it might not be easy at first." Isla shook her head. "I want this. I do." She paused. "It's more than just the money. It's an opportunity to learn." Zane's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. He noted her determination, her quiet strength, and the way she spoke without pretense. It was refreshing, disarming, and a little unnerving. "Good," he said finally. "Tomorrow, then. You'll start tomorrow." The next day, Isla arrived at the office, carrying her usual quiet confidence. She had dressed simply, modestly, and professionally, nothing that would draw unnecessary attention. But the moment she entered, she felt the curious gazes of the employees. Whispers followed her as she passed, quick glances at her mud-stained beginnings from the first date, now cleaned but still leaving traces of her humble past. Some stared with pity, others with skepticism. She held her head high, let her focus do the talking. Zane observed from his desk, noting the subtle tension in the room, the judgmental whispers that surrounded her, and he found himself quietly protective. Sahar, Zane's younger sister, entered later that morning. She had heard about Isla from Zane and wanted to meet her. Her presence was warm, her smile genuine. She extended her hand to Isla, who shook it hesitantly at first. "I've heard about your work," Sahar said. "Your skills are impressive. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Isla felt a flicker of reassurance. It was rare for someone in this office, so polished, so distant, to treat her with normalcy, without judgment. Sahar had a way of looking past the exterior, seeing the person beneath. "Thank you," Isla said softly. "That means a lot." Sahar nodded, as if understanding the battles Isla had faced, the quiet dignity she carried despite everything. Days turned into weeks. Isla adjusted to the rhythm of the office, slowly earning the respect of those around her. Her attention to detail, her eye for design, and her quiet, steadfast approach to work began to speak louder than any prejudices. Zane, meanwhile, found himself observing her more often than he realized. He noticed the little things, the way she interacted with Hassan over the phone during breaks, her polite patience with the staff, her ability to maintain dignity even under scrutiny. One afternoon, Sahar invited Isla to lunch in the office cafeteria. As they walked together, Sahar leaned closer. You know, Zane isn't always forthcoming with his thoughts. But he admires you, she said softly, more than he realizes himself. Isla blinked, unsure how to respond. She had noticed subtle changes, the small gestures, the concern, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't noticing. But she hadn't dared name them. Really? She asked cautiously. Yes, Sahar smiled. He's fascinated by you. He wants to understand your life. Don't be afraid of it. Isla's heart raced. She didn't know what to make of it, nor whether she could allow herself to believe it. The idea that someone like Zane, powerful, wealthy, polished, could genuinely care for someone like her seemed impossible. Yet, Sahar's words planted a seed of curiosity she couldn't ignore. Later that evening, Isla returned home. Hassan was waiting for her, full of energy despite the day's activities. She watched him play, and a small smile crept across her face. He was the center of her world, her anchor, and every step she took in this office and life was for him. Her phone buzzed. A message from Zane. I hope the day went well. I noticed the way you handled the samples. You have a talent many overlook. Isla stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly. She didn't know if this was professional praise or personal attention, and part of her didn't want to care. Yet, the acknowledgement, the simple recognition, made her chest tighten with something she hadn't felt in years. Appreciation. She typed back, "Thank you. I appreciate that." The reply didn't come immediately, but she didn't expect it to. Zane was precise, deliberate, and measured in his communications. Yet, she felt the subtle weight of his attention. Over the next few weeks, Isla began to open up about her life to Sahar. The stories she shared were carefully curated, only small glimpses of struggle and resilience. Her ex-husband, the difficulties of raising Hassan alone, her late nights sewing to make ends meet, the pride she took in never asking for charity. Sahar listened, offering empathy and understanding without judgment. "You're stronger than you know," Sahar said once. And Zane, he started to see that too. "Don't hide it from him." Isla shook her head. "I don't hide it. I don't trust easily." Sahar smiled knowingly. "Some things are worth the risk." That night, Isla sat beside Hassan, reflecting on the weeks since that rainy encounter. Zane had appeared unexpectedly in her life, first as a stranger, then as a helper, and now as someone who recognized her abilities. Slowly, a bond was forming, delicate, tentative, yet undeniable. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if Zane could truly bridge the gap between their worlds. But she knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not for her mud-stained clothes. Not for her exhausted eyes. Not even for her single mother status. But for her. For Isla Rafiq. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start believing that life could surprise her in ways she hadn't dared imagine. The sun had barely risen when Isla woke to the sound of Hassan coughing softly. She rubbed her eyes, panic threading through her chest. He had seemed fine yesterday, but this morning his small body shivered under the thin blanket. "Mama," he whispered, voice hoarse, "my tummy hurts." Isla's heart clenched. She touched his forehead, feeling the heat radiating from his small body. Fever, weakness, all the tiny indicators of illness that no mother ever wanted to see. "Don't worry, baby," she said softly, trying to steady her own voice. "Mama will take care of you." She dressed him in warm clothes, applied a cool compress, and tried to coax him to drink water. But his appetite was gone. He clung to her like he had the first day they'd met Zane, small fingers wrapped around her hand, eyes wide and fearful. By mid-morning, she realized she couldn't manage alone. She had calls to make for work, bills to pay, a schedule that wouldn't bend, and yet her child needed care. She sighed, trying not to let the panic rise. It was then her phone buzzed. a number she hadn't expected. Is Hassan okay? ZM. Her fingers hovered over the screen. How did he know? She hadn't told anyone. He has a fever. I don't know what to do. She typed. Within minutes, her phone vibrated again. I'm coming. Don't worry. Isla froze. Hesitated. She hadn't invited him. She didn't want him involved. And yet, part of her felt relief. Someone competent, someone strong, someone she didn't have to beg for help. Coming. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Isla opened it to see Zane, coat slightly rumpled, umbrella dripping rainwater onto the floor. His face was calm, eyes scanning Hassan's small form on the sofa. Show me, he said simply. Isla led him inside. Hassan clutched her shirt, weak and feverish. Zane crouched down, placing his hand gently on Hassan's forehead. The boy flinched at first, then relaxed. You're burning up, Zane said softly. We need to get you to a clinic. Isla hesitated. She hadn't intended for him to take such action. It's not serious. I can manage. You shouldn't, Zane said firmly. Come on. He carried Hassan in his arms, secure and careful. Isla followed, shivering slightly, anxious but grateful. The drive to the private clinic was silent, punctuated by Hassan's occasional coughs. Zane held him close, adjusting the blanket over his shoulders. You'll be fine, Zane murmured to the boy. We're here. Isla watched quietly from the passenger seat. She hadn't expected him to show such care, such attention to her son. And yet, every careful gesture, every gentle word, carried a weight she hadn't anticipated. Trust. At the clinic, the nurse guided them through checkups. Zane stayed by Hassan's side, holding his hand, adjusting pillows, whispering encouragements. Isla's heart ached at the sight. The first time she had seen someone look at her child as if he were the most important thing in the world. The doctor confirmed it was a mild fever from a stomach bug, nothing serious. He advised rest and hydration. Relief washed over Isla, but it was intertwined with a quiet admiration for the man who had appeared so unexpectedly in her life. Zane carried them back to her apartment afterward, carefully placing Hassan in bed. He checked her scarf, wiped droplets of sweat from her forehead, and finally exhaled. He's safe, Zane said simply. You did the right thing calling me. Isla nodded, overwhelmed by gratitude and a strange, confusing warmth she couldn't name. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how I could repay you. Zane shrugged. You don't have to. Just take care of him. Over the next few days, Zane continued to check on them. Not intrusively, but with a quiet attentiveness that was difficult to ignore. Small gestures, sending medicine, dropping by groceries, making sure Hassan's fever didn't spike. Each act made Isla realize just how different he was from anyone she had met. Not flashy, not pompous, not self-centered. He cared, truly cared. Isla began to notice the subtle ways he studied her, the way he watched her organize the apartment, the careful attentiveness when she explained Hassan's routines, the patience in his voice when answering her questions. He didn't rush. He didn't belittle. He simply observed and offered help when necessary. One evening, after Hassan had fallen asleep, Zane lingered by the doorway. You're exhausted, he said softly. When was the last time you ate properly? Isla shook her head. I manage. You shouldn't, he replied. You deserve rest too. She felt her chest tighten. No one had ever cared for her in this way. No one had ever asked for nothing, simply offered care. And yet, she felt a mixture of pride, confusion, and a strange, nervous comfort. I can manage, she said again, more firmly, though her voice wavered. Zane didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a small cup of tea. For you, he said. Not because you asked, because you need it. Isla took it, warmth spilling into her hands, and realized that this man, so out of her world, so distant, so untouchable, had crossed a boundary few would ever dare. He had entered her life and treated it with respect, not pity. Later that night, she reflected quietly beside Hassan's sleeping form. The day had been exhausting, but also illuminating. Zane had shown her something she hadn't expected, that kindness, genuine and uncalculated, could exist even in a world that often judged her harshly. And yet, With that realization came a dangerous flutter in her chest. The thought that he might truly care, not for appearances, not for charity, but for her and Hassan, was both exhilarating and terrifying. She didn't know what this meant for the future. She didn't know if she could let someone like him into her life completely. But one thing was certain. The wall she had built, carefully and painstakingly, had begun to tremble. Zayn left quietly that evening, ensuring that Hassan had water, that the room was warm, and that Isla had a moment to rest. Outside, the night was calm, yet he felt a restless unease. Something about Isla's life, fragile, hard-working, full of quiet resilience, unsettled him in ways he hadn't experienced in years. He thought about her laughter when Hassan had managed to drink water after a fit of coughing, about her careful movements, her quiet authority over their tiny world. And he realized something he hadn't admitted to anyone. He cared. Deeply, in a way that was unnerving and unexpected. As he drove away, the city lights blurred past. His mind was no longer occupied solely by business, deadlines, or control. Instead, it lingered on a mother and her son, a world he barely understood, yet couldn't seem to forget. Because sometimes, life had a way of finding you, even when you thought you were untouchable. And sometimes, the kindness you offered without expectation returned to you in ways you never imagined. And for Zayn Mirza, that moment had arrived. The office was a maze of glass and steel, polished floors reflecting the fluorescent light above. Isla moved carefully through it, balancing a stack of fabric samples, her heart steady, her focus razor-sharp. She had grown used to the curious stares, the hushed whispers that followed her since she'd started working there. But today, something felt different. The first whisper came from the far end of the floor. "That's her? The one Zayn brought here." Isla paused, tightening her grip on the samples. She knew who her was. That unmistakable tone, a mixture of judgment and disbelief, always accompanied the kind of office gossip that thrived on wealth, privilege, and the tiniest misstep. She forced herself to keep walking. Ignore. Focus. Don't let them see the tremor in her hands. By mid-morning, the whispers had grown louder, joined now by barely concealed smirks and exchanged glances. Isla tried not to notice, but when a senior colleague leaned over her desk and muttered, "Does he even know what he's doing? Hiring someone like her?" The words hit her like a slap. She clenched her jaw, refusing to respond. She didn't need to argue. Her work would speak for her. It had to. Yet the weight of judgment settled heavy on her shoulders. She wasn't just facing the workload of the office. She was facing a world she had never belonged to, and people who wanted to remind her of that with every look, every whisper. Meanwhile, Zayn Mirza sat at his desk, reviewing design layouts, but he couldn't ignore the tension in the room. He had noticed the way employees were subtly shifting, the flickers of disdain aimed at Isla. He clenched his jaw. For all his control, all his polished calm, he could not abide injustice when it was so blatant and undeserved. He rose from his chair, walking toward Isla's desk. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice measured but carrying an unmistakable edge. The whispers ceased immediately. Conversation stalled. The office seemed to hold its breath. Isla looked up, startled. "Yes, I'm fine," she said softly. Zayn's gaze swept the room, sharp and steady. "Good. Then focus on your work. If anyone has an issue with that, they'll need to speak to me." The subtle authority in his tone silenced everyone. But Isla noticed the faint tension in his jaw, the barely restrained anger in his eyes. He had stood up for her quietly, effectively, without making it a spectacle. It was the first time anyone had done that in her adult life, and it left her heart pounding, both with gratitude and with something she wasn't ready to name. Later that day, as Isla arranged fabric swatches on her desk, a message popped up on her phone. "Zayn, lunch. Meet me in the conference room." Alone. Isla hesitated. Her instincts screamed caution. Office gossip was relentless, and being alone with the CEO, a man whose presence had already changed the office dynamic, could ignite more speculation. Yet, she felt a flicker of trust. She nodded to herself, setting down the fabrics and walked toward the conference room. Zayn was already there, standing by the window, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the city below. He turned when she entered. "You handled yourself well today," he said simply. Isla felt her chest tighten. "I tried. Tried isn't enough to describe it. You stayed composed while everyone else didn't." She flushed, unsure how to respond. Praise from Zayn Mirza carried weight, not just professionally, but personally. "Thank you," she murmured. He nodded. "I also want to warn you. Office politics aren't kind. They'll try to belittle you, spread rumors, anything to make you doubt yourself." "I know," she said quietly. "I've been through worse." He studied her face, noting the faint shadow of pain in her eyes. "You deserve respect, Isla. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her scarf. His words were gentle, yet firm, a rare combination that unsettled her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The next few days were tense. Isla noticed sidelong glances, hushed conversations stopping abruptly whenever she passed. Rumors began to circulate about why Zayn had personally hired her. Some speculated about nepotism, others about favoritism. Isla ignored them as best she could, focusing on the fabric samples, on designs, on patterns. Yet the whispers never fully disappeared, always lingering like a shadow. It was one afternoon when Hassan's laughter over the phone broke her concentration. Zayn had asked to speak with him during a brief check-in. His voice was soft, coaxing, full of warmth. "Hello, little man," Zayn said. "How's my favorite co-pilot today?" Hassan giggled. "I'm better. Mama says I'm strong." Isla smiled quietly, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. Even amidst office tension, even amidst the subtle cruelty of gossip, here was someone who genuinely cared about her life, her son, her world. Zayn hung up, leaving a small note on her desk. "You're doing fine. Don't let them shake you." Isla stared at it for a long moment, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. It wasn't just encouragement. It was acknowledgement, recognition, and perhaps something more. That evening, she walked home with Hassan, the city lights reflecting in the puddles from the earlier rain. Her mind wandered to Zayn, to the quiet way he had defended her, to the kindness he had shown her in ways that transcended wealth or power. She realized something dangerous. She was beginning to rely on him, emotionally, mentally, and that frightened her more than she cared to admit. No one in her life had ever been consistent in caring, in supporting, in simply showing up without expectation. Zayn had done it repeatedly, and she couldn't ignore that the way he looked at Hassan, the way he noticed the smallest details in her life, stirred something deep in her chest. Isla tightened her grip on Hassan's hand. She needed to stay grounded. She couldn't let office politics, feelings, or admiration cloud her judgment. She had a child to care for, responsibilities to shoulder, a life to manage alone. And yet, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the man who had stepped into her storm and held her son, the man who had offered work and respect, the man who had quietly, unassumingly, begun to break down the wall she had built around herself. And somewhere deep down, Isla knew this was only the beginning. Because when worlds collide, as hers and Zayn's had, the echoes were never small. They changed the course of lives. And hers was changing, whether she was ready or not. The office felt unusually tense that morning. Isla had arrived early, hoping to finish a batch of fabric samples before the usual bustle began. But almost immediately, she sensed it. Whispers, stifled laughter, the subtle exchange of knowing glances. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had faced judgment before, in the streets, in shops, even on the first day Zayn had brought her here. But the office was different. The scrutiny came dressed in silk and suits, with a professionalism that made cruelty sting sharper. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the samples spread out before her. Yet the words reached her ears. "Really? Zayn Mirza hired her? Can you believe it? Someone like her doesn't belong here. It's embarrassing for him." Isla's hands trembled ever so slightly as she stacked the swatches. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was weary, exhausted from constantly defending her existence simply by being herself. But she didn't notice Zayn entering the office. his presence commanding silence immediately. He approached her desk, eyes scanning the room. "Isla," he said quietly, but his tone carried an authority that made heads snap around. "I need to speak with you in my office." Isla nodded, trying to hide the relief that surged through her. She followed him, leaving the murmurs behind. Zane's office was quiet, bathed in the golden light of the morning sun. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Sit," he said, then leaned back in his own chair, hands folded. Isla perched on the edge of the chair, her fingers twisting the hem of her scarf. She wasn't sure if she expected a reprimand or praise, or perhaps a mixture of both. "I know you've noticed the whispers," Zane said softly. "The judgment, the assumptions, and I know it's exhausting." Isla looked down. "It's not new. I've faced this my whole life. I try to ignore it." He studied her carefully. "You shouldn't have to ignore it. You belong here, Isla. Not because I say so, because of who you are. Your work, your integrity, your dedication. They speak louder than gossip ever could." Her chest tightened. Words like these were rare in her world. Rare and fragile and terrifyingly comforting. "I thank you," she whispered. Zane's gaze softened. "I want to make something clear. If anyone treats you unfairly, undermines you, or speaks of you disrespectfully in this office again, they'll answer to me. I won't stand by and watch it happen." Isla blinked. She didn't expect this. Protection from Zane Mirza. Not patronage, not pity, but something deliberate, intentional. A shield she didn't know she needed. Later that afternoon, the whispers reached their peak. One of the senior designers, a woman named Maheen, approached Isla with a forced smile. "So, working with Zane?" "Huh," she said, voice laced with condescension. "I wonder how long it will last." Isla took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm here to work, Maheen. If you have an issue with that, perhaps you should focus on your own tasks." Maheen's smile faltered slightly, but she tried to regain composure. Just saying, not everyone can survive in this environment. Before Isla could respond, Zane appeared behind her. His tall frame seemed to fill the room, his presence sharp and deliberate. "Excuse me, Maheen," he said, voice calm but unmistakably firm. "I believe Isla is more than capable of handling herself in this environment. And if you have doubts about that, we can discuss them in private, in my office." Maheen's face flushed. She muttered something inaudible and retreated, leaving Isla stunned and momentarily speechless. Zane turned to her. "Are you all right?" he asked. Isla nodded, heart still racing. Yes. Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said softly. "You don't need protection, but you shouldn't face disrespect alone." Her chest tightened. The line between professionalism and something more personal blurred, and she felt emotions she wasn't ready to name. That evening, Isla returned home with Hassan, exhausted but a little lighter in spirit. Zane's support, his recognition, had shifted something inside her. For the first time, she felt seen, not just for her resilience, but for her worth. Hassan, cheerful despite the day's events, ran to her with a drawing in hand. "Look, Mama, I drew a dragon this time." Isla smiled, brushing his hair. "It's amazing, sweetheart." She placed the drawing on the fridge, pausing to take a deep breath. Her life was still complicated. Her responsibilities still weighed heavily. But the events of the day reminded her that she wasn't completely alone, that sometimes kindness and protection arrived in unexpected forms. And then her phone buzzed. A message from Zane. "I hope today wasn't too overwhelming. You handled yourself remarkably." Isla's fingers trembled as she read the words. She typed back. "It was difficult, but I managed. Thank you for noticing." The reply didn't come immediately, but she didn't expect it to. And yet, just the acknowledgement, the fact that he had paid attention, settled in her chest like a quiet warmth. Over the next few days, life at the office continued, but the dynamic shifted subtly. Whispers were fewer. Judgment still lingered, but Zane's presence acted as a quiet deterrent. Isla noticed it in the careful way people approached her desk, the hesitant glances before they spoke. She also noticed Zane's small gestures, leaving notes of encouragement on her desk, asking subtle questions about Hassan, or simply checking in to see if she needed anything. It was overwhelming at times, and yet It was comforting in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She realized, with a mixture of fear and hope, that her life, her carefully constructed, solitary life, was changing. Slowly, quietly, in ways she hadn't anticipated. And the man who had entered her world like a storm, with presence, with kindness, with a protective instinct she didn't know she needed, had begun to leave footprints on her heart. That night, Isla sat beside Hassan, reflecting on the events of the day. She realized something important. Strength didn't always mean doing everything alone. Sometimes it meant allowing someone to stand beside you. And she couldn't deny the stirring of something deeper. Curiosity, trust, maybe even the beginnings of something she hadn't allowed herself to hope for. Connection. Because when Zain Mirza chose to protect, to support, and to acknowledge, it wasn't out of obligation. It was a choice. And that choice, repeated quietly, subtly, was changing everything. Isla tightened her hold on Hassan, whispering softly, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. Days turned into weeks. The office had settled into a rhythm. Isla approving her talent, her dedication, and her quiet strength. Zain noticed everything. The way she stayed late to perfect a design, the way she cared for Hassan in every little detail, the quiet resilience in her gaze. One afternoon, Zain found her alone in the design room, arranging swatches. He approached quietly. "You're improving faster than expected," he said. Isla looked up, surprised. "Thank you, sir. I try my best." He leaned against the table. "It's more than that. You bring life to the designs. A perspective most people overlook." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to brush it off, to stay professional, but the warmth in his tone lingered. Would you like to join us for lunch?" he asked, hesitation in his voice, subtle but real. Isla blinked. Lunch? Alone with him? Not in a business context? Her pulse raced. I'd like that," she replied softly. They walked to a small cafe nearby. Conversation flowed surprisingly easily, shifting from work to Hassan, to her life, to little things that never seemed to matter but now did. Hassan, meanwhile, had taken a liking to Zain. That evening, he ran to the door, shouting, "Zain, uncle, come play with me." The sight of the boy hugging Zain tightly made something unnameable stir in Isla's heart. Gratitude, yes, but something warmer, deeper, more terrifying. Zain looked at her, caught her eyes for a fleeting moment, and smiled gently. It wasn't just kindness. It was recognition, trust, and an unspoken understanding that their worlds, though different, were intertwining. By nightfall, Isla lay beside Hassan, exhausted but filled with a strange, comforting hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, love, or something close to it, was beginning to bloom. The day arrived when Zain visited them at home, not for work, not for formalities, but simply because he wanted to. Hassan ran to him, laughter spilling like sunlight through the small apartment. Isla watched quietly, her heart full. No judgment, no whispers, no barriers. Just a man she had learned to trust, a man who had proven that his care was genuine. Zain knelt beside Hassan, playing and joking, and then turned to Isla. "I've been thinking," he said softly, voice steady, "about you. About us. About Hassan." Her breath caught. "Us?" "Yes," he said. "I don't want to interfere with your life, but I want to be part of it. Fully. If you'll allow me." Tears pricked her eyes. She had feared hope, feared disappointment, feared judgment. Yet here he was, patient, gentle, unwavering. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. I want that too," she whispered. Hassan clapped his small hands. "Mama, you're happy." They laughed. The apartment, once a small, quiet world of survival and struggle, felt full, alive, and warm. Zain reached out, gently holding Isla's hand. Not a grand gesture, not an extravagant display, just simple, steady reassurance. "Together," he said softly. "Together," Isla echoed, her eyes bright. The next few months were a delicate balancing act. Work, care, love, laughter. Isla continued her designs. Zain supported her every step. and Hassan thrived in the warmth of two people who genuinely loved and protected him. The office gossip faded as her talent and professionalism silenced skeptics. And in their home, small routines became precious memories: shared breakfasts, evening walks, laughter echoing through the rooms, quiet conversations, and the small, unspoken promises of the heart. One rainy evening, reminiscent of their first encounter, Zayn held Isla and Hassan close as they watched the city shimmer through the drops on the window. "This is home," Zayn murmured. Isla smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Yes, it finally feels like home." And so, a single mother, her son, and the man who had entered their lives unexpectedly build a life together. Not perfect, not without struggles, but full of love, respect, and the kind of happiness that begins quietly, grows steadily, and lasts forever.